The cruelest sentence in a marriage is not always spoken in anger. Sometimes it is whispered with regret by the person you still think is choosing you. Michael Carter heard it on a quiet Sunday evening in their home outside Columbus, Ohio, while the dishwasher hummed in the kitchen and a late spring rain tapped softly against the windows. He had been carrying a folded blanket from the laundry room when he stopped near the hallway, not because he meant to listen, but because Jessica's voice had changed. It had become lower, heavier, the way people sound when they are saying what they have been holding back for too long. She was in the living room, phone pressed to her ear, speaking to her sister, Lauren. Every day with him was nothing but regret. Jessica said, "I wish I had this right before marriage." Michael stood completely still, one hand still gripping the blanket, the cotton warm from the dryer. At first, his mind tried to protect him by refusing the meaning. Maybe she was talking about someone else. Maybe she was quoting a friend. Maybe the word him did not mean the man standing 10 feet away in the hallway of the house he had helped pay for, repair, and fill with the kind of steady love she once said made her feel safe. But then Jessica continued, "Michael is not a bad man. That almost makes it worse. He is kind, responsible, predictable. But I wake up beside him and feel like I chose a life before I understood what I actually wanted." The blanket slipped slightly in his hands. Predictable, responsible, kind. She spoke those words like they were soft chains instead of the very things she had once clung to when her life felt uncertain. Michael looked toward the framed wedding photo on the console table. In it, Jessica was laughing under white flowers, her hand wrapped around his arm, her face bright with the kind of certainty people later pretend they never had. He remembered that day clearly. The small chapel, the humid June air, her father's trembling toast, the way Jessica whispered before walking into the reception. "No matter what happens, I feel lucky I chose you." Lucky. Now she was telling someone that every day had been regret. Michael did not step into the living room. He did not demand that she repeat it to his face. He did not drop the blanket or slam a door or turn pain into a scene she could later call dramatic. He simply stood there and listened as his marriage quietly changed its shape. Jessica sighed on the phone. "I know I should have admitted it sooner. I kept thinking the feeling would pass. But now I see other women rebuilding their lives, traveling, taking risks, meeting people who actually challenge them, and I wonder if I signed away the best part of myself for comfort." Michael closed his eyes. Comfort. That was what he had been reduced to. The mortgage paid on time. The oil changed before winter. The soup made when she was sick. The steady paycheck. The safe drive home from late events. The quiet man who remembered her mother's appointments and bought her favorite coffee creamer without being asked. He had mistaken those things for love because Jessica once called them love. Now she called them evidence that she had settled too soon. A small sound came from the living room, maybe the scrape of her wine glass against the coffee table. "I just wish I had known what real freedom felt like before I married him," she said. That was the sentence that finally made Michael move. Not toward her. Away. He carried the blanket back to the laundry room, folded it with careful hands, and placed it on the shelf as if finishing the chore mattered. Then he walked into the kitchen, turned off the dishwasher's heated dry setting because Jessica hated when plastic containers warped, and stood for a moment under the yellow light above the sink. His reflection in the dark window looked calm, almost unfamiliar. Behind him, the house remained warm and orderly. Nothing had broken, not visibly. But inside Michael, something had stepped back from the edge of begging. When Jessica ended the call and came into the kitchen, she found him rinsing a mug. "You are quiet," she said. Michael turned off the faucet and looked at her. For 1 second, he wanted to ask if she meant it. If every day had really been regret. If the life he had built with both hands had felt like a mistake to the woman sleeping beside him. But he already knew that asking would only teach her how much the words had cost him. So he said only, "Long day." Jessica nodded, relieved by the simplicity of the answer. That relief told him almost as much as the phone call. She did not want a husband who heard her truth. She wanted a husband who stayed useful while she decided whether she regretted him. Later that night, after she went upstairs, Michael sat alone at the dining table and opened a blank note on his laptop. At the top, he typed one word, clarity. Then he began writing dates, accounts, shared obligations, and the first sentence he had heard clearly enough to never forget. Every day with him was nothing but regret. He did not know yet whether he would fight for the marriage, leave it, or simply stop carrying a version of it Jessica had already buried in her heart. But he knew one thing with painful certainty. If his presence had become her regret, he would not keep offering it like a gift she was forced to accept. Before Jessica ever called him regret, Michael Carter had been the man she introduced as proof that life could finally feel safe. 8 years earlier, they met at a small community fundraiser in Columbus, Ohio, where Jessica had arrived late, soaked from rain, and embarrassed because her old car had stalled 3 blocks away. Michael was not the loudest man in the room. He did not work the crowd or tell stories designed to make strangers admire him. He was standing near the back, helping an elderly volunteer tape signs to a donation table because the adhesive kept failing in the damp air. Jessica noticed him because he noticed everything else first. The wet sleeve of her blouse. The way she kept glancing toward the window, worried about the car. The forced smile she wore when people asked if she was fine. He did not make a grand gesture. He simply walked over after the speeches ended and said, "I have jumper cables in my trunk if you need them." That was how it began, not with sparks or drama, but with someone seeing a practical problem and choosing to help without turning it into a performance. Jessica used to say that was what made Michael different. He did not chase attention. He built trust quietly. After they started dating, he learned the little things without needing applause for remembering them. She liked her coffee strong, but never bitter. She hated driving in heavy rain. She needed 10 quiet minutes after work before anyone asked about her day. She always checked the stove twice before leaving the house because her mother had scared her with stories about kitchen fires when she was a child. Michael never teased her for it. He checked once with her, then once after her, and locked the door without comment. In those early years, Jessica called that love. When her father had surgery, Michael took 2 days off work, drove 6 hours total between Columbus and Cleveland, and sat in hospital waiting rooms with her family, while Jessica slept with her head on his shoulder. When she cried in the parking garage because she was tired of pretending to be brave, he did not tell her to calm down. He handed her a bottle of water and said, "You do not have to be impressive right now." She repeated that sentence in her wedding vows. The guests laughed softly, but Jessica cried when she said it because she meant it. Michael remembered the weight of her hands in his, the way she looked at him as if certainty had finally found a place to rest. Their marriage was not glamorous, but it had rhythm. Sunday grocery runs. A small house outside Columbus with creaky floors and a maple tree that dropped leaves across the driveway every October. Wednesday night pasta. Summer trips to Lake Erie. Winter evenings where Jessica read on the sofa while Michael reviewed work reports at the dining table. She used to say their life felt like a deep breath after years of holding air in her chest. Michael believed her. He believed it when she asked him to help organize her graduate school applications. He believed it when she said she wanted a steady home more than a flashy one. He believed it when she told her sister Lauren, years before that terrible phone call, "Michael makes ordinary life feel like something I can trust." So he built ordinary life with care. He paid attention to interest rates before refinancing. He changed furnace filters before winter. He made sure Jessica's car had new tires after one bad slide on an icy road. He created a shared budget so she could leave a job that was draining her and take a lower-paying role with better hours. He did not call those sacrifices. He called them marriage. But people can grow comfortable inside a shelter and then mistake the walls for a cage. The change began slowly after Jessica started spending more time with women from her new workplace. Women who spoke about reinvention, missed chances, solo travel, and the danger of settling into a life before discovering yourself. None of those ideas were wrong by themselves. Michael believed people should grow. He wanted Jessica to grow. But he began to notice that every conversation about growth ended with their marriage being treated like the thing standing in her way. She bought books about starting over. She followed accounts that turned dissatisfaction into wisdom. She made comments about women who married too young, even though she and Michael had both been old enough to choose. At first, he thought it was a phase of self-reflection. Then he noticed the way she looked at him when he did something thoughtful, not with gratitude, but with a kind of tired pity, as if his kindness reminded her of a version of herself she was trying to outrun. The night after he heard her on the phone with Lauren, Michael sat at the dining table with the word clarity glowing at the top of his laptop screen and understood the cruelest part was not that Jessica felt regret. People can become confused. People can grieve roads not taken. The cruelest part was that she had allowed him to keep performing the role of a beloved husband while privately deciding every day with him had been a mistake. He looked around the warm, orderly house and saw every detail differently. The framed vows, the refinanced mortgage folder, the rain tapping the windows, the blanket folded on the shelf. All of it had once been evidence of a life she wanted. Now, to Michael, it looked like a museum of things Jessica had learned to resent only after he made them stable enough to ignore. Jessica's words had begun to echo in Michael's mind, creating a quiet tension that neither wanted to confront directly. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting the small kitchen where they once shared pancakes, and now Michael sat alone, staring at the coffee pot, remembering how she had laughed at the way he carefully flipped each piece to golden perfection, and how every day of ordinary routines had once felt like a gentle rhythm of life that belonged to both of them, yet now seemed like a distant memory, a life measured in regret and whispered complaints. The office, once a shared space of ambition, where Michael had celebrated her promotions and victories with genuine pride, now felt like a reminder of a partnership she no longer valued. As he replayed her words about wishing she had known this before marriage, a phrase that clung to him like fog in the early hours, obscuring the warmth of the home they built together, he thought about the small balcony outside their bedroom where they had watched sunsets in quiet companionship, and the way she had once rested her head on his shoulder while discussing future plans, each promise made with sincerity, each gesture unremarkable yet profound. Yet now he questioned how many of those memories were genuine, and how many had been a rehearsal for a life she secretly judged as insufficient. The phone calls she made to friends while he was at work, the subtle shifts in tone when she discussed her dissatisfaction with colleagues who understood her better, the increasing frequency of weekend plans without him. All of these details combined into a tapestry of silent separation that neither of them had articulated, a growing distance bridged only by routines that Michael now viewed with scrutiny, realizing that his consistent presence, patience, and support had not inspired gratitude but a quiet impatience on her part. He remembered specific moments, like the night she had argued about attending a seminar for self-improvement, claiming she needed inspiration he could not provide, and the sting in his chest when he had encouraged her to go, supporting her growth, while she left him feeling inadequate and unneeded, a feeling that gnawed quietly at the edges of his normally steady confidence, prompting him to reflect on the cumulative weight of these small dismissals. Michael walked through their living room, noting the framed photos of vacations, birthdays, and family gatherings, each image a testament to shared experiences and careful planning, yet now a silent reproach, as if each captured moment emphasized the contrast between what she said she wanted and what she now seemed to resent. The quietness of the house, punctuated by the ticking clock and distant traffic, mirrored the tension in his heart, the unspoken truth that despite his efforts, the foundation they had built on trust, care, and mutual support was eroding under the pressure of her unacknowledged dissatisfaction. He sat back down, sipping the coffee that had cooled, pondering whether love is always enough when one party no longer perceives it as such, and contemplating the possibility of stepping away not in anger, but in recognition of a space where he could reclaim his dignity and peace. Leaving behind the curated life that had once been a shared dream, now burdened with quiet regret and unspoken grievances, while the morning light continued to filter through, unchanging, indifferent to the complexities of human expectation and desire. The first truly suspicious thing Michael noticed was not another man, not a hidden hotel receipt, not a message that proved betrayal in a simple shape people could understand. It was a suitcase. A small navy suitcase sat half-hidden behind Jessica's side of the closet on a Wednesday morning, the kind she used for overnight trips, with a luggage tag from a women's retreat still wrapped around the handle. Michael saw it while reaching for his work jacket, and for a moment he stared at it with the strange calm that comes when the heart recognizes a pattern before the mind is ready to name it. Jessica had not mentioned traveling. She had told him she was attending a local self-discovery seminar downtown that weekend, something about clarity, courage, and choosing the life that finally fits. He had encouraged her to go because that was what he had always done, support her search for herself, even when that search kept placing him outside the room. But the suitcase changed the shape of the story. That evening, While Jessica was upstairs taking a shower, Michael saw her phone light up on the kitchen island. He did not touch it at first. He had never been the kind of husband who treated privacy like a locked door he was entitled to break. But the screen stayed bright long enough for one preview to appear. I keep thinking about what you said. If I had known this before marriage, everything would have been different. The sender's name was Lauren, her sister. Michael stood under the kitchen light, the house quiet around him, and felt the words connect to the sentence he had already heard. I wish I had this right before marriage. This, not a person necessarily, not an affair, something more slippery and harder to confront, a belief, a lifestyle, a new version of herself that had made their marriage look like a mistake. When Jessica came downstairs in sweatpants and a loose sweater, her hair damp, she found him sitting at the table with his hands folded beside the untouched dinner plates. "You did not eat?" she asked. "I was waiting." She paused, reading the room. "For what?" Michael looked toward the closet hallway, then back at her. "Are you going somewhere this weekend?" Jessica's face tightened by a fraction. "The seminar. I told you. With a suitcase?" Her eyes changed, not with guilt exactly, but with irritation that she had been noticed. "It is an overnight retreat now. They opened a room block near German Village. I did not think it was a big deal." "You did not think telling your husband you were staying away for the weekend was a big deal?" Jessica pulled out a chair, but did not sit. "See, this is why I hesitate to tell you things. You make everything feel heavy." Michael nodded slowly. Heavy. That was another word she had learned to use when honesty asked too much of her. "What is it that you wish you had known before marriage?" Her face went still. "What? I heard you talking to Lauren. And I saw part of her message today." Jessica crossed her arms, defensive now. "So you were listening to my calls and reading my phone?" "I heard my name in my own house, and a message lit up in front of me." "That does not give you the right to interrogate me." Michael stood, not quickly, not angrily, but with the quiet exhaustion of a man who had been asked to feel guilty for noticing the floor disappearing under him. "I am not interrogating you. I am asking what life I am actually living in." Jessica looked away first. Outside, the rain had started again, soft against the windows, the same patient rain that had filled the silence the night he learned she called him regret. "I do not know," she said finally. "I have been feeling like I missed something. Like there was a version of myself I never got to meet because I chose comfort too early." Michael absorbed that. Not because it was new, but because it sounded cleaner when spoken directly. "And I am the comfort." She did not answer. She did not have to. The empty chair, the suitcase, the phone message, the untouched dinner plates, all of it answered for her. "I am going to the retreat," she said, softer now, but still firm. "I need space to understand what I want." Michael looked at the woman he had once believed found peace exciting, and he realized she was asking for space without acknowledging the damage already done inside it. "Then take the space," he said. Jessica blinked, almost disappointed that he did not fight. "That is it. That is it." He picked up his plate and carried it to the sink. "But while you are deciding whether our marriage was a mistake, I am going to stop pretending it is still safe for me to live inside your uncertainty." She stared at him, unsettled by the calm. Michael rinsed the plate, turned off the water, and left the kitchen before she could rename his boundary as pressure. Upstairs, he took the spare pillow from the closet and placed it in the guest room. It was a small movement, almost invisible, but in a marriage built on small things, even a pillow moved across the hall can be the first sign that the old life has started packing itself away. The next morning, Michael woke in the guest room before the alarm, staring at a ceiling he had rarely seen from that angle and listening to the faint sounds of Jessica moving through the house as if nothing irreversible had begun. A drawer opened in the bedroom. A zipper moved around the edge of the navy suitcase. Water ran in the bathroom. The ordinary noises of a marriage kept happening, but they no longer sounded like belonging. They sounded like evidence. Michael sat up slowly, folded the blanket at the end of the guest bed, and checked his phone. No message from Jessica. No apology left outside the door. No soft knock in the night. Just a calendar reminder for the furnace inspection he had scheduled weeks ago, and a bank notification showing another charge for the weekend retreat hotel near German Village. He opened his laptop and added the charge to the document titled Clarity. Then he created a second section, shared obligations, personal boundaries, possible separation steps. The words looked cold on the screen, but they felt less cold than pretending he had not heard what he had heard. At 7:15, Jessica appeared in the kitchen with her hair pulled back, wearing travel clothes and an expression that asked him not to make the morning difficult. Her suitcase stood by the front door. Michael was making coffee, one mug for himself, none for her. She noticed. He noticed her noticing. "I am leaving around 9, she said. "The first session starts at noon." "Okay." She leaned against the island. "That is all you are going to say?" Michael poured coffee into his mug and set the pot back. "You said you needed space to understand what you want. I am not going to argue with space." Jessica's mouth tightened. "You are making it sound selfish." "No," he said. "I am making it sound accurate." She looked away toward the window, where morning rain had gathered on the glass in soft gray streaks. "I need this weekend, Michael. I need to know whether I chose my life or just accepted the first safe version of it." There it was again, safety spoken like a lesser prize. He nodded once, not because it did not hurt, but because pain no longer required him to explain itself aloud. "Then I hope you get the answer." For a moment, Jessica seemed unsure whether his calm was kindness or distance. Maybe both. She picked up her purse, hesitated, and said, "I am not trying to hurt you." Michael looked at her then. Intentions do not erase impact. The sentence landed between them with enough weight that she had no quick response. She left at 9:06. Michael watched from the front window as her car pulled out of the driveway, the navy suitcase visible through the back window. When the car disappeared down the wet street, he did not collapse. He did not rage. He cleaned the kitchen, emptied the trash, and walked through the house with a notebook. Mortgage, insurance, utilities, retirement accounts, joint savings, her car loan, his personal account, her retreat charges, the lower-paying job he had encouraged her to take because she said her old job was draining her soul, the home office furniture they had bought together, the emergency fund he had built one careful transfer at a time. By noon, Michael was sitting in a small law office near downtown Columbus across from Rebecca Sloan, a family attorney recommended by a coworker who had once gone through a quiet divorce. Rebecca had kind eyes and a voice that did not waste words. Michael explained the phone call, the suitcase, the message preview, the retreat, the guest room, and the years of him being called safe until safe became another word for regret. Rebecca listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "You do not have to decide today whether the marriage is over. But you do need to stop living as if your uncertainty has no legal or financial shape." Michael looked down at his hands. "I do not want to punish her for being confused." "Then do not," Rebecca said. "Protect yourself from being used while she decides whether she regrets you." That sentence stayed with him the rest of the afternoon. Protect yourself from being used while she decides whether she regrets you. They reviewed practical steps. Separate his new deposits into an individual account. Document shared expenses. Avoid emotional arguments by text, preserve the mortgage records, and prepare a temporary separation framework if Jessica returned with more ambiguity than commitment. Rebecca also told him to stop making invisible sacrifices while waiting for visible respect. Michael almost smiled at that because it sounded like something he should have learned years earlier. That evening, he returned to the house alone. Jessica texted at 6:30. First session was intense. A lot to think about. He read it in the kitchen, where the rain had finally stopped and the windows reflected his face back at him. The old Michael would have answered with comfort, asked what came up, told her he was proud of her for doing hard emotional work. The old Michael would have made her exploration easier even when he was the thing being questioned. This time, he typed, "I hope it gives you clarity. We should discuss practical matters when you return." Jessica replied, "Practical matters?" Michael set the phone down without answering. He went upstairs, moved more clothes into the guest room, and removed his wedding ring before placing it in the top drawer of the nightstand. Not thrown, not hidden, just placed aside. In the hallway, the wedding photo still showed Jessica laughing under white flowers, bright with certainty. Michael stood before it for a moment and whispered, "I believed you then." Then he walked away, knowing that belief was no longer enough to keep him sleeping beside someone who had started treating his life as the mistake she was trying to outgrow. Michael spent the morning reviewing his finances and household responsibilities with a clarity that had been absent for years, noting shared accounts, upcoming bills, and the implications of Jessica's retreat. He realized that protecting his own stability did not require animosity, just clear boundaries and meticulous organization. So he began separating his accounts, cataloging assets, and documenting all shared obligations while imagining the conversations he might need to have if Jessica returned with new demands. Each entry on the spreadsheet a quiet assertion of self-respect and an anchor in the shifting emotional landscape. By noon, he had called a trusted financial advisor to discuss temporary management of joint assets, and a friend recommended a therapist who specialized in couples navigating separation, allowing him to prepare a mental roadmap that included both practical considerations and emotional safeguards, understanding that detachment was not abandonment but a form of self-preservation. He walked through the house carefully, noting small personal items he might need to claim or store separately, and cleaned up remnants of their shared life that he could manage without confrontation, creating spaces that were entirely his own while leaving hers untouched, practicing a gentle form of separation that minimized conflict and maximized clarity, all while maintaining an awareness of how each action might be perceived, weighing honesty and transparency against unnecessary disclosure. Lunch was quiet, just a sandwich and water, but each bite felt deliberate, a moment of grounding in a day that could otherwise feel chaotic. In the afternoon, he drafted emails to service providers to confirm account access and to ensure that communication channels were clear, professional, and free from emotional entanglement, taking care to phrase everything in neutral terms, protecting both parties from misunderstandings, and ensuring that any future disputes could be addressed with evidence and clarity. He spent some time walking in the nearby park, noting the calm of the trees and the rhythm of his own steps, allowing his mind to organize thoughts and anticipate questions he might have to answer about living arrangements, shared responsibilities, and personal boundaries, all while resisting the urge to react emotionally to potential scenarios, reinforcing the new mental pattern of careful, measured response. By early evening, Michael returned home and reviewed notes and documents, making minor adjustments to ensure accuracy and completeness, feeling a sense of control that had been absent during months of uncertainty, and recognized that this methodical, structured approach was not merely about protecting assets, but about affirming his own agency and dignity in the midst of upheaval. As night approached, he reflected on the day's accomplishments, recognizing that establishing these boundaries and maintaining composure in the face of disruption would serve as a foundation for both personal recovery and any negotiations or interactions with Jessica, realizing that preparation, clarity, and calm decisiveness were the tools that allowed him to move forward without resentment or regret, setting the stage for the next steps in his life with a sense of empowerment and a clear understanding of priorities, ready to face whatever responses or revelations might come with resilience and thoughtful action. Jessica returned from the retreat on Sunday afternoon with the Navy suitcase in one hand and a folder of printed worksheets in the other, looking less like a woman who had found freedom and more like someone who had been handed a language for dissatisfaction, but not a map for what came next. Michael heard her car pull into the driveway from the guest room, where he had been reviewing the temporary separation framework Rebecca Sloan had emailed that morning. He did not rush downstairs. He did not stand at the door like a man waiting to be chosen again. He finished reading the paragraph about shared expenses, saved the file, and closed the laptop. By the time he reached the kitchen, Jessica was standing near the island, looking at the empty coffee mug on the counter, the one he had used for himself and only himself that morning. Her eyes moved toward his left hand. The ring was gone, not thrown away, not hidden, just absent. "You took it off," she said softly. Michael glanced at his hand as if the fact had become ordinary already. For now, the two words shook her more than an accusation would have. "The retreat helped me see some things," she began, placing the folder on the island. Michael did not sit. "Did it help you see me? Or did it help you explain why you regret me?" Jessica flinched. "That is not fair. It is exact." She looked down at the folder, then back at him. "I was overwhelmed. I was tired of feeling like my life had become automatic. The facilitator asked us to name the thing we wished we had understood before making major commitments, and I thought about how much I had built my identity around safety." Michael leaned one hand against the back of a chair. "And I became the symbol of that." She swallowed. Yes, the honesty should have comforted him. Instead, it made the wound cleaner. "Do you understand what it does to a person to hear that every day with him was regret? Jessica's eyes filled quickly, but he could see she was trying not to use tears as a bridge back to comfort. I said it badly. No, Michael said. You said it clearly. Outside, the last of the afternoon rain slid from the maple leaves in the driveway. Inside, the kitchen felt too bright, too familiar, too full of objects that belonged to a life being evaluated like a wrong turn. Jessica stepped closer, but stopped when Michael did not move. I do not want to lose you. He studied her face, searching for the difference between fear and love. That is not the same as wanting me. She covered her mouth for a moment, then lowered her hand. I know. That answer surprised him because it was the first one that did not try to win. He pulled a chair out and sat, not because he was softening, but because the conversation had finally stopped pretending. Jessica sat across from him. Michael opened the folder Rebecca had prepared and placed a single page on the table. These are practical boundaries while you decide what your regret means, and while I decide whether I can live beside it. Jessica stared at the page. Separate sleeping arrangements. Individual deposits. Shared expenses reviewed in writing. No major financial decisions without agreement. Counseling if reconciliation is discussed. No using personal growth language to dismiss emotional harm. That last line made her close her eyes. You think I did that? I know you did. She nodded slowly, then read the page again. So this is a trial separation inside the house. For now, if it becomes unhealthy, I will leave the house physically too. Her voice cracked. Michael, I am not saying that to punish you. I am saying it because I am done being the safe option you resent while still using the life I maintain. The silence after that was different from every silence before it. It did not hide anything. It held everything in place. Jessica looked around the kitchen, at the labeled pantry shelves, the calendar on the wall, the small repair note near the back door, the comfort she had once called love and then later called a life too small for her. I did not know how much I had turned your steadiness into something to blame, she whispered. Michael watched her, wanting to believe the sentence, refusing to build a future on one moment of remorse. Then sit with that before asking me to forgive it. She nodded, wiping her cheek. That evening, they did not eat dinner together. Jessica went upstairs and unpacked her suitcase in the bedroom. Michael reheated soup for himself and ate at the kitchen table with Rebecca's paperwork beside him. At 8:15, Jessica came down holding the framed wedding photo from the hallway. For a second, he thought she was going to ask where to put it. Instead, she placed it gently on the table between them. I remember meaning it, she said. Michael looked at the photo. White flowers, humid June air, Jessica laughing like certainty was easy. So do I, he said. She waited, but he gave her nothing more. Not because he wanted her to suffer, but because some pain should not be rushed into resolution just because the person who caused it finally feels it. Later that night, Michael returned to the guest room, closed the door softly, and listened as the house settled around them. Jessica was home, but the marriage was not. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And for the first time, Michael understood that clarity did not always arrive as an answer. Sometimes it arrived as the strength to stop pretending uncertainty was still love. The first week of the trial separation inside the house felt less like living together and more like walking through a museum after the lights had been lowered. Michael and Jessica shared the same address, but not the same rhythm. He slept in the guest room, kept his ring in the nightstand drawer, deposited his paycheck into an individual account, and answered practical questions in writing when they involved money, repairs, or schedules. Jessica did not fight the boundaries, which was the first proof that something in her had changed, but not enough for Michael to trust it. Change, he had learned, could be panic wearing nicer clothes. On Tuesday evening, she found him in the kitchen reviewing the utility bill and the mortgage statement, his laptop open beside a yellow legal pad. She stood near the doorway for a moment, watching the ordinary concentration on his face, and for the first time the sight did not feel boring to her. It felt frighteningly valuable. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Michael looked up. "You can ask." That was different from yes, and she understood why. "How long have you been carrying this much?" He followed her eyes to the bills, the repair notes, the insurance folder, the budget calendar, the furnace inspection receipt, the refinance paperwork, and the small spreadsheet he had maintained for years without ever showing it to her as a weapon. "Since we decided this was our life," he said. Jessica stepped closer, but stayed across the island. "I thought you liked handling things." "I did." He closed the laptop halfway. That does not mean it did not matter whether you saw it. She nodded slowly. The retreat had taught her words like alignment, expansion, and authentic desire, but none of those words helped her answer the man standing in front of her with years of quiet labor folded into his silence. I think I turned your care into furniture, she said. Something I expected to be there because it always was. Michael looked at her carefully. And then you blamed the room for feeling small. Her eyes filled, but she did not look away. Yes. The honesty was better now, less polished, more painful. Still, Michael did not move toward her. The old version of him would have softened the moment, rescued her from the weight of seeing herself clearly, maybe even apologized for not making his love feel exciting enough. This version stayed still. Jessica looked down at her hands. Lauren called today. She asked whether I felt free after the retreat. Michael waited. I told her I did not know what freedom meant if the first thing I did with it was wound the person who had protected my peace. The sentence entered the kitchen quietly, and for a moment Michael had no defense against it. Not because it fixed anything, but because it sounded like a woman finally noticing the difference between comfort and captivity. Then Jessica opened the small drawer beneath the calendar and took out the old wedding vow booklet they had stored there after moving into the house. The pages were slightly bent at the corners. She placed it on the island between them. I read mine this afternoon, she said. I promised not to confuse calm with lack of passion. I forgot I said that. Michael remembered. He remembered standing in the small chapel in humid June air, hearing that line and feeling chosen in exactly the way a steady man hopes to be chosen. Not for fireworks, but for the life after them. Forgetting is one word for it, he said. Jessica accepted that. Resenting is more honest. The house hummed softly around them. Refrigerator, rain gutters, the distant rush of a car passing on the wet street. Jessica touched the edge of the vow booklet, then slid it toward him. I am not asking you to come back to the bedroom. I am not asking you to put the ring on. I am asking if you would be willing to go to counseling with me before we decide anything final. Michael looked at the booklet, then at the hallway where the wedding photo still hung. I already told Rebecca I would consider counseling if reconciliation became a real discussion. I know. I am saying I want it to be a real discussion. His face did not change. Wanting it now is not the same as honoring it then. I know. And regret is not proof of love. Her voice broke, but she held herself together. I know that too. That was the first evening they talked without Jessica trying to make her confusion noble and without Michael trying to make his pain convenient. They discussed counseling dates, financial boundaries, separate rooms, and what honesty would have to look like if they were going to survive, even as two people in the same house. Jessica admitted the retreat had not given her freedom. It had given her permission to say things she had already been feeling, and she had used that permission carelessly. Michael admitted he had made steadiness look effortless for so long that he had helped create the illusion that it cost nothing, though he refused to take responsibility for her contempt. By the end of the conversation, nothing was restored. No embrace closed the scene. No music swelled. No simple forgiveness arrived to make the audience comfortable. Jessica went upstairs alone. Michael stayed in the kitchen, opened the vow booklet, and read the line she had mentioned. Do not let me mistake your calm for emptiness, because I know it is where your love lives. He read it twice, then closed the booklet and set it beside his laptop. For the first time since the phone call, he felt something other than grief or strategy. He felt the smallest, most dangerous thing of all, a possibility. But he also knew possibility was not a promise. It was only a door. And this time, Jessica would have to be the one who learned how to knock before entering. The first counseling session took place on a rainy Thursday evening in Columbus, in a small office with soft lamps, blue chairs, and a window that looked out over a parking lot shining with water. Michael arrived separately and sat on the left side of the couch, not close enough for habit to pretend things were normal. Jessica arrived 6 minutes later, holding the vow booklet in both hands like it was fragile enough to tear if she gripped it too tightly. The counselor asked what brought them there, and for the first time, Jessica did not begin with confusion, freedom, or the life she thought she had missed. She looked at Michael and said, I hurt my husband by turning his steadiness into a prison in my mind. Michael looked down at his hands because the sentence was both overdue and difficult to receive. The counselor asked what steadiness had meant before it became a complaint. Jessica opened the booklet and read the line from her vows. her voice shaking when she reached the words calm and emptiness. Then she closed it and said, I forgot that his calm was not absence. It was effort without noise. Michael felt those words enter a place in him that had been locked since the night in the hallway. They did not heal it. They simply reached it. When it was his turn, he did not speak like a man ready to return. He spoke like a man done protecting someone from the truth of what she had done. I can survive being told you are unhappy, he said. I cannot live beside someone who calls every day with me regret and still expects me to keep making those days easier. Jessica cried quietly, but she did not interrupt. That mattered. The counselor asked what Michael needed to feel safe enough to continue. He named it plainly: separate rooms for now, financial transparency, no using self-discovery language to dismiss harm, weekly counseling, and a written agreement that if Jessica needed space, she would ask for space without rewriting the marriage as a mistake. Jessica agreed to every point, but Michael did not mistake agreement for transformation. After the session, they stood under the awning outside the office while rain tapped on the pavement. Jessica said, I do not want you to come home just because I am scared. Michael looked at her, surprised by the restraint in that sentence. Good. She nodded, accepting the answer. I want to become someone you would not have to leave to be heard by. That was the closest thing to hope he had felt, and hope frightened him more than anger because anger knew where to stand. Hope always reached toward the door. Over the next month, they lived carefully. Jessica attended counseling alone and with him. She stopped treating regret like wisdom and began tracing where it came from. Envy, comparison, fear of aging, fear of choosing wrong, fear that a quiet life meant she had failed to become extraordinary. Michael listened, but he no longer rushed to reassure her. When she called herself terrible, he did not comfort her out of accountability. When she said she missed sleeping beside him, he said, I miss who we were before you made me question whether that person was real. She accepted that too. Slowly, not dramatically, their house changed. The guest room remained his room. The ring remained in the drawer. But Jessica began noticing what she had once dismissed. The budget calendar, the furnace filters, the coffee creamer, the way Michael left space before speaking so truth could land without being sharpened into a weapon. One evening, 2 months after the phone call that broke the old version of their marriage, Jessica placed a new note beside his laptop. It said, I do not regret the life we built. I regret becoming too blind to honor it. Michael read it while she stood across the kitchen, waiting without demanding an answer. He folded the note once and placed it in the drawer beside the old vow booklet. Thank you, he said. She nodded. It was not forgiveness, but it was not nothing. Some stories end with doors slamming. Some end with people running back too soon because loneliness feels like love. But Michael's story did not end in either of those easy ways. It ended with a man refusing to be treated like a mistake, and a woman learning that freedom built on contempt is only another kind of loneliness. Whether their marriage survived would depend on what Jessica did long after regret stopped sounding dramatic and became daily discipline. But Michael had already won the most important part back: himself. What do you think hurt Jessica more? Realizing Michael heard her cruel words, or realizing the life she called regret was the very life that had protected her peace? Share your thoughts, because stories like this remind us that steady love is not small, and comfort is not a cage unless we stop honoring the person who built it with us. If you believe quiet strength, dignity, and hard truth deserve to be heard, make sure you subscribe so you do not miss the next story.